All right. I'm ready to call the meeting to order and take the opportunity to welcome everyone back I hope everybody had a nice Easter long weekend and had the opportunity to spend some time with family and couldn't beat the weather. That's for sure. Our land acknowledgement, we acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties agreements between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, allied nations, and peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat people, and the Caldwell First Nation. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed and moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. To the members, any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda is presented to you this afternoon. I see none. We'll have that duly noted. Delegations. I don't think we have any delegations today. Communications, none to report, but we do have some reports. So we'll move on to report number 1 from the Legislative Clerk Services. 2023-11 Council Vacancy Policy Update. And I believe, Mr. Auger, you're going to bring that report forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council vacancy policy, the current form of it, was last utilized by council when there was last a vacancy, and that goes back to 2022. After that policy was used, administration has since reviewed the policy and made a few changes. I would say minor changes, but designed overall to streamline the process for council should there be a vacancy in the future. Just by way of really quick background, council, of course, when there is a vacancy, is required to declare that vacancy at the very next meeting under the Municipal Act. Generally speaking, within 60 days after that declaration, council is to decide whether to fill that vacancy through the calling of a by-election or to fill the vacancy by way of appointment. Two small exceptions to that are related to election year. If it's already past March 31st in the election year, then council has to fill by appointment. And if we're within 90 days of election day, then the seat shall remain vacant until after the election. So this policy is to streamline, this policy is amended just to streamline the process when council decides to fill that vacancy. And it relates, the policy as worded relates to essentially 2 scenarios. One, when there's a councillor vacancy. And then secondly, when the seat of either the mayor or the deputy mayor is vacant. So just a few comments on that. With respect to filling a councillor vacancy by appointment. So again, council has already gone through the process. They've decided against a by-election. They've decided to do it by appointment. So then the policy steps in. So filling a councillor vacancy, the requirement is to fill the vacancy through appointment of runner-up candidates from that most recent election. So in that scenario, if they're the candidate that received the most votes but was not successful and is otherwise still qualified to serve and accepts to serve, then that would be the appointment. And so council would simply confirm by resolution, a simple resolution, confirming that appointment has been made. And at the next meeting is when that appointed runner-up candidate would give their oath of office, and a bylaw would then be passed just to confirm. Should that runner-up candidate either not be qualified or refuses to accept, then in successive order, council would go to the next runner-up again, with the most votes, who wasn't successful. If in some scenario, there is no available runner-up, so perhaps in a situation where the vacant seat was acclaimed, and so there's now a vacancy, but there was no runner-up candidates, then there would be a call for applications. And so this process, I believe, under the wording of the new policy is streamlined in that the clerk will conduct that call for applications. Sorry, let me just get to I'm just going to quickly go through the highlights of that. So through call of applications, the clerk would simply post a public notice in whatever form and manner deemed appropriate. Any individual wishing to be considered would sign a simplified appointment application form and a declaration of qualification, again, stating that they're qualified to hold that potential office. If the candidate wishes, they can submit a personal statement, which would only be a 2-page statement of why they feel they're qualified to serve in that office. That application, that personal statement, if they filed, would then be attached to the council meeting in which council would look to appoint. At that meeting, council would provide the opportunity for each of the applicants to provide a brief 5-minute statement. And then after that, council, by simple resolution, would appoint the successful appointee. And again, same process. Once the successful appointee has been selected by resolution, the oath of office, the bylaw would come at the next council meeting. What has been streamlined is the previous policy had various voting protocols in place, in which there could be successive ballots on that vote. We eliminated all that. We're asking council to pass a simple resolution appointing that person. The second scenario is when there's a vacancy either at the mayor or deputy mayor position. And the intent here is to still fill that position with again, assuming council's already gone through the exercise of deciding that they do not want a by-election, they want to appoint. In that scenario, again, council, according to the policy, would look to appoint a sitting member of council. Those sitting members of council who wish to be appointed would provide notice in writing to the clerk, I believe 4 to 5 days before the council meeting that the clerk has so designated for that appointment. And then again, at the meeting itself, a simple resolution of council, no voting, no potential multiple ballots if there's ties, just a simple resolution of council. That's essentially it. Those are the changes we identified that would hopefully, we hope anyways, to simplify the process. If council has any questions, I'd be glad to take those.
I just have one, and in particular, if there's a vacancy that's created, if it be the mayor's seat in particular, with the majority of the mandates still ahead of us, like and so forth, and I think there is a proviso, but I do believe a by-election should be done. And the reason why I say that is obviously a mandate was done and elected by the residents in the community. And so there's an expectation from the residents in terms of delivering, X over a long period of time. So in my opinion, for truly to be representative of democracy, in particular, if there's 36 months or even 24 months, that I believe a by-election is merited in that regards.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that option is available to council. Certainly upon council declaring the seat as vacant, the next exercise is within 60 days to determine whether to fill it by appointment or by the holding of a by-election. Certainly the clerk's report that would come to that meeting would certainly specify the requirements of both. I would reiterate the appointment process, but I would also provide a report on the holding of a by-election, some of the timing, some of the deadlines for nominations, when the election date would be, and an estimate of what the by-election could cost the taxpayers. And certainly, yeah, council would be at its liberty to consider all those factors.
Is there a 90-day requirement, though?
90
90 days time for a by-election.
Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, if it's 90 days before a general election, you cannot fill it. The seat would remain vacant. If it's after March 31st in an election year, you can only do appointment. Any other time, council has the discretion to decide by election or appointment.
Okay. I don't plan on going anywhere. No. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Jobin.
Sure, through you, just for conversation. We did unfortunately have to go through the process with the sudden passing of a councillor. And then even in a positive note, we did when Andrew Dowie moved on. So we've gone through it in both positions and navigated through it seamlessly. So I think that we will be able to, if we're ever in either of those situations again, but I appreciate the report and prepared to move to receive.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, yeah, move by Councilor Jobin, supported Councilor Tonio. And in both those cases, I believe council made the right decision. The last one, we had no choice because of the provincial stature. The first one for Councilor Rohr, we did the right, in my opinion, the right decision at that time. So with that.
To receive an approval.
She said to receive. Can you see clarification of the mover?
She wants to move it?
Yeah,
Well, she's moving that she received.
yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, the
clarification.
recommendation is to receive and
Oh,
approve. If
I
council
think
so
she wants to
wishes.
approve. That's what I thought. Approve, approve. All in favor to approve?
Policy's
It's
getting
carried
better.
as approved.
We're a little rusty on the policies part.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Go ahead. This is I'm glad this is on the agenda today, in particular, the licensing of mobile food vendors. We're already seeing them out in the parks as we see. So it's good that this is on the agenda. Mr. Ogier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back in 2021, council asked administration to research regulations on licensing the operation of mobile food vendors and to come back with a draft regulatory framework. And that's certainly what we believe council has before it tonight in the way of draft bylaw 2023-047. Just a draft, we're asking for council to consider it for passage at the upcoming April 25th regular council meeting. But just a draft for council and public's review at this point. So off the top, the town, as everyone knows, does not currently regulate mobile food vendors. But certainly under the act, council certainly has authority to do so and to pass bylaws respecting the same. So the bylaw that's proposed before council this evening identifies two types of food vendor vehicles. One in which we call refreshment vehicles and the other entitled frozen treat vehicles. So refreshment vehicles, essentially, just by way of quick definition, means any selling or offering of food primarily based from any vehicle, whether motorized or not. Refreshment vehicles are and the licensing associated with that is proposed to be licensed for a specific location for the town. That will certainly assist with any regulation that's required. It'll assist with ensuring proper enforcement and so that the town can properly keep track of the various vendors that may be out there at various locations. So the license would be for a specific location in which they can operate. Vehicles will be permitted to operate on private property, assuming they have owner permission. And they may do so in areas that are either commercially, industrially, or institutionally zoned, or within a business park zone, as identified through the town's zoning bylaw. If the proposed location is on town property and is at a town special event location, then certainly town authorization would be required as part of that, and together with potential payment of any additional permits or fees that may be applicable. Frozen treat vehicles are essentially a subclass of refreshment vehicles, but the difference is that the frozen treat vehicles only provides ready-to-eat frozen desserts, such as ice cream. Those vehicles, those ones classified as frozen treat vehicles, are permitted to operate on municipal roads, only in residential areas of the town. And there would be specific regulations, such as not visiting the same location within a 2-hour period, not stopping at a location longer than 10 minutes unless it's to serve customers, and then restrictions dealing with times. Other general provisions in the bylaw, and I'm just going to go to the bylaw itself, starting at section 2.15, just to list some of the general requirements that are associated with this. So for refreshment vehicles, there is a proposed fee, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The potential applicant for that license would need to submit a photograph of the proposed vehicle, a current list of the locations the location that they wish to operate, a list of persons who will be operating, a copy of the vehicle registration, copy of a valid safety standards certificate, agreement to indemnify the town and to provide commercial proof of general liability insurance, proof of inspections, whether it's through the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit, whether it's through the Technical Standards and Safety Authority, and that would likely be in a situation where the refreshment vehicle is fitted with propane or natural gas, a copy of valid food handler certification card, proof of inspection conducted by the fire chief, again, written permission for private property, and then certainly such other conditions as the town may attach to that particular license. The licensing requirements for frozen treat vehicles are similar in some respects. Again, application fee, photograph, a list of the persons operating. Because the operator for frozen treat vehicles will be operating in family and residential neighborhoods, there would be an additional requirement of a vulnerable sector criminal record check. Again, indemnification and proof of insurance. Again, proof of all applicable inspections. The requirements of that they cannot stop for longer than 10 minutes in one location, not visit the same location with the same 2-hour period. And then finally, there's some location requirements that could be applicable to both refreshment vehicles or frozen treat vehicles. Again, the location of refreshment vehicles, so accepting frozen treat vehicles, so not including frozen treat vehicles. Those vehicles can be on private property, again, in a commercial, industrial, institutional zoned or within a business park zone. There's also an allowance for those vehicles to potentially be curbside on municipal road allowances within the Tecumseh CIP, provided that written permission has been obtained by the property owner of that land that the refreshment vehicles proposing to operate in front of. There's also restrictions against operating refreshment vehicles within 60 meters of a school, within 60 meters from the front entrance of an eating establishment, unless authorized to do so by that eating establishment. Again, licensee operating a frozen treat vehicle, only allowed to operate from a municipal road in all residential zones. And then requirements against requirements imposing restrictions on refreshment vehicles being located in areas of obstruction. So where they can obstruct the entrance or exit to any building or obstruct the accessibility of a sidewalk. And then finally, a requirement will also provide for enforcement and particular penalties. So there would be set fines as relating to operating without such a license, or if there's a failure to comply with some of those requirements. Council may remember that back in 2022, the town had conducted a survey on licensing mobile food vehicles. The results from from those surveys were part of the package given to you tonight. Generally, overall, community feedback seemed to be very positive. And so if this is something that council's interested in, administration would look to launch the program to begin receiving applications as early as May 1st for the summer season. Administration is proposing a fee of $350 per license. Again, licenses for refreshment vehicles would be on a per location basis. And then for frozen treat vehicles, proposing the same fee, and that would be on a per vehicle basis, one license per vehicle. So at that point, council has the draft bylaw before them. If you have any questions, we can try to answer those questions.
Go ahead, Councilor Tonio. Go ahead, Councilor Tonio.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Robert, places like Frank's Beer, they have a food truck in the back. They would not have to get a permit for that. They're just using it to serve food for their patio in the back, or would they be required to add that to their tax base? You know what I mean? It's something we gotta look at, because I know some businesses have it on their own property as part of their business. Would they be required to get a permit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Technically, at the moment, the way the draft is bylaw, or the way the draft bylaw is stated, it would capture that. But that's something we can look at in the scenario you've laid out. It's the same owner. The owner of the establishment has the truck. So the way it's worded right now, it would require a license to so operate. And that's, again, to ensure, you know, health and safety requirements, food handling requirements are being met. Yeah, it is the way it's worded right now. It would capture that scenario as well.
A follow-up, Mayor. I would suggest maybe we look at that. You know, this company, you know, these businesses are already paying taxes, and we're asking them just because they add another property thing to add more business to their property, and we're going to charge them a fee for it. I think we should look at that. Maybe have a subsection in there that would kind of alleviate that kind of fee to businesses that already want to add that to their parking lot.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's, you know, if that's council's wish, that's something we can look at. Certainly, maybe in a scenario where the operator of the mobile truck and the physical establishment are one and the same, then maybe the main concern is just to ensure that the mobile truck is following health and safety regulations as opposed to a fee. But in a different scenario where the operator of the food truck and the physical business are two different entities or two different people running the business, then perhaps that's still captured under the bylaw and the licensing associated with that, together with whoever has brought the mobile truck onto the business premises would obviously need permission.
I like both those scenarios, so thank you.
If I may too, just add to that, if the vehicle itself, I mean, if it's on site, that makes sense. It's there. They've got to be, the health unit has to, you know, give them the go ahead. All the other requirements need to be there. If sometimes with, for example, when we had the event at McAuliffe, when we had all the food trucks that were in that area. So Frank decided that particular business to move that vehicle onto that site, then he'd have to be subject to the fee. So if it's serving its own property, its own people, so forth, I mean, it doesn't make sense that, you know, there, but. Go ahead, Councilor Jobin.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To Robert, so the proposal is a $350 fee. It's the highest of all the municipalities and even the city of Windsor. So is the message we're sending like we want quality over quantity? Because like as a if I were an owner operator of vendor, a truck, I would probably go where I would start at the lowest fee and build my customers in that regard instead of going where it's the highest fee. So is the message we don't want to do business, or are we looking to be competitive and have quality? I don't know if council's looking at that as a price point. I feel like I'd like to maybe go more at the 250 mark and be a little more even playing with the rest of the municipalities. I mean, 100's too low, 350, we're higher than anybody else. I mean, it's a new thing. It's fantastic. I know we're going to have some events, but I think it's kind of that we stay within the same playing field with the rest of the municipalities, but it's the wishes of council, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
So through the mayor to council, I think the price point that was chosen was in an effort to ensure that we offset some of our own processing costs in a more substantial way. This is a new service, if you will, and so it's one that the town hasn't exercised in the past, and so we are trying to recover some of our costs associated with the process, and still be within a reasonable price point for the vendors.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Higginson.
Thank you very much. And through you, that was part of my question too, is how did we kind of land on that amount? And I wondered if it was to recover some of the costs. And I can appreciate that that is something that we're obviously trying to mitigate there, the costs that are administratively held by us, but in an effort to encourage this new option for some of our local businesses or other businesses that are in the area. I wonder if we would be willing to lower it and gain feedback on what the uptake of the program is and what our actual realized costs are administratively. So if we needed to adjust it higher later, I wonder if that's something that council would be willing to adjust.
Through the mayor to council. Well, we're in your hands on that. I think we wanted to start at a price that was reasonable and that sort of kept, people thinking about viable enterprises as well, so that we to Councillor Jobin's point is quality over quantity of the type of mobile food vendor or mobile treat vehicle that we were attracting to Tecumseh in an effort to ensure that citizens are happy with this service as well in their neighborhoods.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I note that there's survey data in here that indicates that people are looking forward to something like this. So I wonder if we're looking to, if it's council's wish to kind of leave it at 350, maybe we could get some feedback after this first season of it, based on that previous feedback that we have about interest in the program and then what the actual outcomes of that program were. Maybe we can make a more educated guess after that, considering what it will cost and then what the program actually works out to be.
Yes, I think that would be wise. And what I'd like to see as well is that, so obviously feedback from them, but feedback also from the treasury as well, to make sure that, we're covering our costs, or close to it, but because it's obviously the inspections, we got inspectors are going to go out and do their, their job, and inspecting that. Fire department's going to have to make sure that, their the TSSA requirements are met and so forth. So, the other question I would ask is that when this report came out and the pricing that's on there, that I would assume that was last year's, right?
Yes.
And so I don't know what their price points would be this year as well. So, we're starting fresh. So I think easier to go down than to go up. Go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I also shared the same concerns, but hearing the message from the CAO that even at the 350, we will not be recovering our costs. I'm interested to hear the feedback, maybe by the end of this year, And then if it does end up being a budget discussion or something out of that we're hearing of those complaints, or that, you know, we're way out of whack on covering our costs. I'm happy to move that we leave them where they are, but, you know, pending that feedback. The one question I do have with regards to any of our sporting groups, and I think of like McAuliffe Park or Optimus Park, where they're running soccer and lots of events, and we don't have a specific vendor in that area. I know in Lakeview Park, we've got a vendor there, but I'm just wondering, you know, sporting groups, if, you know, McAuliffe Park Soccer connected with a vendor, and you know, they were there, you know, every Saturday, or, you know, a couple times during the week. This policy doesn't cover them actually parking in the parking lot, right? Not on municipal property. It's only on the roadside. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This policy would also capture to a certain extent on public lands as well, like any town properties. But certainly when we receive those types of applications, we would be doing so in consultation with Community and Recreation Services, and whatever their requirements are for any events or any matters on town property. But the bylaw would, and the requirements, specifically your health and safety requirements and other items like that, would be tied in with the bylaw as well.
And okay, thank you, because I'm just thinking, you know, are we allowing that instance to, you know, to go on, and you know, sporting groups to, you know, connect, now that we're allowing food trucks in the town, or are we somewhat prohibiting it? But I'm hearing that we are capturing it, and it will be something that you know, they would be able to do. You know, I think the policy you know, covers everything that, you know, jumps out to me as what we would want to you know, the policies that we would want to put in. And you know, I'm looking forward to hearing not only the feedback, but seeing, you know, trucks on the road, and you know, community groups and events, you know, going on more centered around food trucks. So looking forward to seeing, you know, what comes out of this year, and I'm sure we'll hear the feedback, you know, good and bad, you know, as it develops. So thank you.
Okay. On the recommendation, move, Councilor Tonio, supported, Councilor Houston.
Yeah, I'll support, but with the additions, which Councillor Tonio had mentioned about.
Yep,
Yep.
as
capturing that.
amended. Yep.
As amended.
All right, anything further? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Yeah, go.
Please. So just through to council before we get to the other, you'll notice on these reports that have bylaws associated with them, that those bylaws are intended to be brought on the April 25th meeting. So in the event that you did have some other concerns or questions that may result in an amendment, those can be captured and reported out on the 25th as well.
Thank you. All right, third item is the Town of Tecumseh new fireworks bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The current fireworks bylaw, which is 2013-50, was passed back in 2013. But upon review of this bylaw, it now appears to be outdated somewhat, as it doesn't directly address some of the contemporary health and safety concerns regarding fireworks. And certainly to a certain extent, the current bylaw could be more practical in providing some clarification for residents as far as you know, what needs a permit, what doesn't need a permit, the types of fireworks, and then certainly the bylaw as currently existing does not provide tools to town bylaw enforcement. And so that was one of the main reasons why we underwent a review of this bylaw. So when reviewing the current bylaws, some of the following concerns were raised. First, the bylaw only allows for fireworks to be sold for limited days before and on Victoria Day, Canada Day, 4th of July, and New Year's Eve. The new bylaw as proposed that council has in front of it this evening, and again, as previously mentioned, this would be recommended for consideration of passage back at the April 25th regular meeting. But the new bylaw as proposed does not restrict when such fireworks may be sold, as long as the requirements of the permit to sell those fireworks are being complied with. Second concern, the current bylaw has no restrictions as to when consumer fireworks could be set off. The proposed new bylaw now identifies those days in which consumer fireworks may be set off, and certainly includes and provides some flexibility in that other days may be approved by the fire chief as and when appropriate. The current bylaw does not make a distinction between the type of between the type of fireworks. So the bylaw identifies consumer fireworks, and then leading up the chain of more progressive fireworks, display or high powered fireworks, and pyrotechnic special event fireworks. Nor does it explain the specific requirements or regulations around each type of firework and restrictions as may be the case for the setting off of those fireworks. The current bylaw did not have or had very little in the way of detailed safety requirements when storing, selling, displaying for sale, or setting off fireworks. We feel the proposed new fireworks bylaw now makes those distinctions. The current bylaw did not provide detail as to a formal process to make an application, for example, to use display fireworks, nor details on receiving a permit. So the new proposed bylaw again provides for this. And then lastly, and as mentioned before, the bylaw did not provide for short form wording or set fines, certainly making enforcement efforts a little bit more of a challenge and cumbersome. So the proposed new fireworks bylaw will provide for that. Other key aspects of the new proposed bylaw 2023-045 are as follows. The bylaw prohibits the displaying or offering for sale or setting off of firecrackers and flying lanterns. The proposed bylaw again makes a distinction between 3 types of fireworks, each with their own definitions, restrictions, regulations, and safety precautions. Setting off consumer, or what's sometimes also called family fireworks, the proposed bylaw defines the dates and times that consumer fireworks can be set off without a permit. And then again, if there's other dates, then that would be subject to approval of the fire chief, but the dates are set without a permit for consumer fireworks. For permits for setting off display, or what they call high powered fireworks, that bylaw prohibits the setting off unless a permit has been applied for and granted. A permit may be granted for the purposes of celebrating the holidays on the dates designated, or for such other events or day and time as approved by the fire chief. Pyrotechnic special effect fireworks. Again, those who wish to set off those types of fireworks are to follow the same permitting application process. However, pyrotechnic special effect fireworks must be set off under the supervision of a certified pyrotechnician. The bylaw also now has insurance requirements and indemnity requirements. So applicants are to sign and provide with the permit application and indemnification in the event the town suffers any cost or damages as a result of that permit being taken out. In summary, the proposed bylaw will address the health and safety concerns in order to make the fireworks and the bylaw a little more practical for residents. It will be enforced by the town's bylaw enforcement officers and or the Ontario Provincial Police. And certainly, again, in order to assist with enforcement, the bylaw will have set fines that are applied for and obtained. And certainly, if and when the town moves to an administrative monetary penalty system, this would be an apt bylaw to consider under that system. Lastly, the bylaw provides that permit applications are the current bylaw provides for a fee of $50, but certainly it's recommended that as part of the recommendations this evening that administration be directed to review that fee and if necessary at the appropriate time, bring back to council as a proposed amendment to that, either directly to that bylaw or through the fees and charges bylaw. That's a quick summary. If council has any questions, again, we can try to answer those.
Go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify, because I know last year we were experiencing some area businesses that were letting off fireworks outside of above and beyond these dates, almost like on a regular weekly basis. So to say they are permitted to do that so long as they have gotten permission from the fire chief, or, and that's just that. So as long as the fire chief says they can do it every Friday, as long as they want the entire season, then that's just how it will roll. Is that correct?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be up to the fire chief to provide authority for that, but it would also depend on the type of fireworks that they're proposing to set off. Depending on the type of fireworks, there may be other specific requirements that they have to meet as part of the permitting process. But again, that would be up to the fire chief to spell out perhaps what other conditions, maybe there's other conditions that the fire chief feels are necessary. Maybe he would like a member of the fire rescue team to be there to for safety purposes. Maybe there may be other requirements that the chief, but ultimately, yes, it would come up to the chief.
Go ahead, Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to the clerk and to what Councillor Jobin was saying. I'm thinking of the fireworks display that they usually do at India 47 for the India's birthday, and I forget the date and I forget what it's called. So yeah, in their Independence Day. But I'm just saying, I recall in the last 3 years that they've been open, I think they have done a celebration on that day every year, and I don't know if they do it themselves, or I don't know if they hire the local K&H to do that, but I think that's one where I see in the policy the avenue to get the approval from the fire chief, and there could be many other ethnic holidays, right, that people may want to do those. So I see that we have that in there, but just to clarify, they would then just send an email or attend the fire hall to get that written approval.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, most likely with those fireworks, they would most likely be considered display fireworks. So there for sure would be a permit required and an application in order to start the process with the fire chief. But ultimately at that point, the fire chief would review the application process. If necessary, attach any other conditions that may be required. But certainly the bylaw was purposely drafted to allow that flexibility for many types of potential holidays or celebrations.
And second to that, Your Worship, I'm just thinking of maybe an easy portal online down the road for a quick form for someone to fill out in order to apply in those cases. So, thank you.
Yeah, because I think, it should be inspected and to make sure that, right now I know they're actually going on the vacant land on part of the extension of that plaza and that, but that's soon going to be filled and so forth. So depending on where they're doing it, but I think it's the volume that they were using as well is they need to notify the fire department and get a permit for that. But most of them on the bigger stuff, it's well supervised and so forth. My biggest concern is the average Joe who will line up a whole host of Roman candles and all the other stuff in the middle of the road, and it happens because I know it happened right in front of my house a few years back, and it was some of it was going on the roofs. And some of it was probably about 3 feet away from the rear gas tank of a vehicle. and we're letting them off right there in the middle of the road. So you know, and it's difficult to have an inspector, because when does it happen? It happens at night. It happens, you know, at 10 o'clock at night and so forth. So what do? Is that a neighbor called the fire department and they came and said, hey, you can't fire these things in the middle of the road. And it was dangerous. So those are the ones that you have to be careful, you know, and I don't know how you can't have a firefighter and, you know, in 8,000 houses, and there's quite a few of them that let off at home and that, but you would hope, and I can only say this, you would hope that common sense would prevail, you know, in where you are actually using these and so forth. But those are the ones that I'm more concerned than, say, the Optimist Club or even Indian 47 and so forth, where they should have supervision, or when we have them the responsibility at Labor Day weekend at the waterfront, and that they're well supervised, fire departments on standby and so forth. It's the one-offs. Those are the ones that but I think you know, we need to educate folks in terms of where they should and shouldn't do and so forth. So some public information on our websites and other areas, and hopefully those who are selling it, it's not just the sake of selling them, but it's also, you know, some safety tips on in terms of where they should and should not let these things off, because if they can get out of hand pretty quick. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. All right, last but not least, I believe. Oh, we got two more. Next one is the town of Tecumseh seasonal patios bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the town currently does not have a permanent bylaw that regulates all commercial patios that legally sell or serve food and beverages. And that means inclusive of existing patios, new patios, and any extensions of current patios. Just a little bit by way of history, prior to the pandemic, the town did not specifically regulate patios that were entirely on private property. If the proposed patio was to be on public property, it was essentially treated as a one-off specific custom-made solution, in that the patio owner would enter into an encroachment agreement with the town, and whatever terms and conditions would be associated with that encroachment agreement. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, AGCO, introduced automatic temporary extensions of an existing legal license on the premises. However, those temporary extensions were subject or conditional upon town's approval. And that included approval to physically extend the liquor license by way of a patio onto municipal or private lands where applicable. So in response, the town, much like a lot of towns across the province at that time, moved pretty quickly to develop a temporary and expedited application process in order to provide for those quick approvals relating to, again, temporary extensions. And that was obviously a pandemic relief measure that the town did from 2020 to 22. Now, as of January 1st, the AGCO no longer accepts applications or has the authority to approve temporary outdoor extensions, or in other words, temporary patios for licensees located in municipalities. Those licensees now need to contact their municipality and find out the process and the procedures in order to obtain that approval. So as a result of AGCO's basically transferring the authority for that to the municipalities, administration felt that it should continue on the one hand to encourage businesses to develop or extend a patio to further assist those businesses as part of the recovery and going forward. So to facilitate this, administration recommends the development of a permanent bylaw with hopefully clear guidelines and requirements that will apply across the board. So again, whether that's an existing patio, a patio to be, or that's being proposed to be built, or the AGCO situation of extending that patio for that temporary season. So as a result, council has before it bylaw 23046. In particular, some of the highlights that I wish to draw attention to for the public and for council. Just quickly, the definition of a seasonal patio. So it's a clearly delineated area upon private lands or municipal lands that is designed for a group of tables and chairs and other accessories for the use and consumption of food and beverages sold to the public. Continuing on with some of the other highlights of the proposed bylaw, a seasonal patio shall be permitted for the period of May 1st to October 31st. That was one of the requirements when the AGCO transferred responsibility for approval. One of the stipulations tied with that was that temporary patios could only be in operation for cumulatively an 8-month period in any calendar year. So a seasonal patio will be permitted for the period of May 1st to October 31st. Seasonal patios will require an annual approval application, and that's either to construct or to operate or to extend that seasonal patio. Upon receipt of the application, and this was similar to what was being done during the pandemic, there would be circulation among the required municipal departments and agencies. And then the town would have the right to either grant approval or refuse to grant approval, and certainly impose whatever other terms and conditions as may be necessary. Patio applications that have been granted approvals will need to adhere to and continue to adhere to Schedule A to the bylaw, which contains the seasonal patio guidelines. And certainly together with that, any other bylaws or regulations that may be required and that are associated with this with food, the serving of food and drink, and health and safety requirements, and certainly again AGCO requirements that are tied to the original liquor license, any other health unit requirements, and so on. There's an annual application fee being proposed of $250, and that's to cover again administration's time in both processing the application and for the inspection. The chief building official under this bylaw would have the right and the continuing right to inspect such patios to ensure compliance as part of the original application process and to ensure compliance going forward. Other provisions that I wish to highlight is the owner's required to indemnify and save harmless the town from any liability which the town may suffer from the issuance of the application approvals. Again, satisfactory proof of insurance needs to be provided. The town would have the right to revoke if there's any non-compliance. And just a couple more, sorry. If a patio is on town property and the town requires that property for municipal purposes, then there's notice provisions in which the owner would be required to remove that patio or that portion of the patio that extends on the municipal land. I think I said this one before, town officer has the right to inspect the patio for compliance. Any contraventions of the bylaw, there would be the possibility of penalties and fines with the bylaw. A couple of points on the Schedule A guidelines. So the guidelines is an effort to comply to ensure health and safety again, whether that's to deal with the construction of the patios, to ensure public safety, to ensure accessibility. So some of the Schedule A guidelines include such matters as providing sufficient information to allow the town to assess the application. So a sketch of the proposed premises together with such other information that the town would ask for as part of that. There would have to be obviously ongoing compliance with AGCO regulations and other applicable laws. There is provision but it would be up to the discretion of the chief building official. If requested, a security deposit of up to $1,000 could be requested to ensure the proper construction of the patio or the patio extension to ensure that it complies with town requirements. And obviously that would be refundable if there was such a request made. The Schedule A goes on further to talk about the meeting of certain installation, ongoing operation, and design criteria. Health and safety requirements, ongoing cleanup and maintenance requirements. If the patio is on town property, if the patio is on town property, there is an annual requirement to not only cease patio operations by October 31st, but there could be the additional requirement to tear down and remove the public from the public right of way by November 30th, unless otherwise authorized by the town. And then lastly, again, there's a fee proposed of $250 per application, and that roughly approximates the cost associated with a typical chief building official inspection. And then while administration will further assess the cost of administering this program, the current fee is comparable and will provide for some cost recovery, but that's something, if the program moves forward, that's something we would look at and monitor, and if necessary, make proposed changes to council. So again, just a quick summary. And again, if council has questions, we can try to answer those.
Questions? Go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. OJ. So just so I understand, this covers patios which mainly encroach onto the town's property, or does this cover patios like in front of Frank's, in front of India 47, and patios that are there all year, but just because our weather isn't the greatest in December for patios, that we don't use them that often. But does this cover all of those patios?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would cover all patios, whether on private or public lands. With respect to those ones that, as you've described, that are on private lands and stay up year round, that would be allowed under the current bylaw. But for those patios that extended onto municipal property, the applicant, whoever's extended on the business that's extended onto town property, would require the permission of the town to continue to leave that patio on town property year round. So even though the period for having that seasonal patio in operation is until October 31st, so operations would be required to cease at that point. The private owner would not necessarily have to tear that down, but the one on public land may have to if the town deems that they need that or it's necessary.
Okay, that makes sense, because and those are the ones I mentioned are ones that I see up year round, right? I think Johnny Shotch is another one where it's there, it's permanent, it's in the front, and just reading it, I was sort of confused a little bit with having a 250 or a yearly fee for extension of the existing business, which is there all year round. So in those cases, they wouldn't have to apply and reapply every year for the patio that is there year round. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. At the moment, the way the proposed bylaw is drafted, there would still be an annual requirement, but there would be discretion on the town officials administering this program to either waive or provide some relief from some of those requirements if satisfied for relating to those year by year applicants. But technically there would still be a requirement to provide application, and if the town deemed it necessary, to still conduct an inspection, just to ensure that those requirements from year to year are still being complied with.
Okay, I do think it's important for us to have those maybe provisions in there for the, those which are yearly, or it's part of the business. I'm not sure quite understanding, the need for reapplication or payment all the time if that patio has been there for as long as the business has been there. I can understand applying once, for it and having it inspected if it's left up year round, but I think it's important for us to have provisions in there if it is a permanent piece of the business. To allow that, I guess, waiving of those fees or where it would be appropriate. And I just, just thinking, how we accommodate for that when it's a permanent piece of the business or a permanent structure that's there all the time. You know what I mean?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that was part of the effort in the draft bylaw is I guess our opinion was it would be good to, or ideal for, the town official who's going to be approving these applications to have some of that discretion associated with. I would hesitate against a provision that, that says they don't have to apply the following year or they don't have to pay a fee the following year, because depending on the discretion, let's say for sake of argument, it's the chief building official. The chief building official may still require that inspection. How else can they otherwise ensure that the requirements are being kept up on an annual basis? So I would want that. I think the effort was to try to reach a compromise to the thoughts that you're conveying, to allow for that discretion where it's reasonable. It might be a patio business or a patio owner that has clearly demonstrated year to year compliance. And so, but I'd rather leave that up as a discretionary matter for in this scenario, the chief building official.
Yeah, I think it's important and because they need to be inspected, and especially wood structures and so forth, make sure that they're compliant and safe and so forth. The other question I have too is that some of the allocations that we did too, do we have to change part of the bylaw as well? Where we actually some of the patios were extended into parking space. And so obviously the businesses had to have a certain ratio of parking and so forth. There's a couple of them examples in terms of extended into the parking lot. So is there a change as well? Because some of the patios were expanded because of COVID. Now that COVID's not here, some of them might see, there's an advantage of having extended patio. So do we have to do anything in changing the bylaws in terms of the ratio parking per commercial facility?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the proposed bylaw and the reason why it's ideal is that it provides for that flexibility, that discretion. So, an applicant submits their site plan, and based on the submittal of the site plan, perhaps it's circulated to the planning department. The planning department will look at what the proposed parking lot allocations are, perhaps make recommendations, perhaps may together in conjunction with the building department, make recommendations on the size of the patio. So to some extent, it still picks up and captures some of the items that were addressed with the temporary bylaws during the pandemic. So there is still the possibility of extending into a parking lot. But at the same time, administration through the bylaws being provided with that discretion to amend that. So I don't believe it would need a specific amendments to that effect in the bylaw. It already provides that discretion.
Any further questions or comments on the amendment to the bylaw? Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Houston. Do I support Councillor Dorner? Thank you. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Culvert condition assessment policy. Number 82.6.
Good evening, your worship, and members of council. So before you this afternoon is report 2023-30 with respect to the culvert condition assessment policy that's before you today. The recommendations contained in the report is that the culvert condition assessment policy 82.6 be adopted to provide a clear, consistent method for determining the condition rating of all culverts with spans less than 3 meters within the town of Tecumseh. So the town's 2022 asset management plan, version 3, that was adopted back in October of 2022, outlines the current and proposed services delivered by the town, the cost to deliver these services, and a financial strategy to fund the necessary expenditures to achieve proposed levels of service. The asset management planning for municipal infrastructures, which is OREG 588-17, requires a data verification policy and condition assessment policies to determine when and how asset information will be verified and when and how assets will be assessed to determine their condition. In January in 2014, as part of the first version of the asset management plan, council adopted the following policies, which now form the 2022 asset management plan version. A data verification policy, as well as condition assessment policies for roads, bridges that were greater than 3 meter span, storm and sanitary sewers, and water mains. The culvert condition assessment policy sets forth requirements for determining an asset condition rating for culverts with spans less than 3 meters. Asset condition ratings are necessary to complete the asset management plan, and this policy serves to provide a clear and consistent methodology for determining such. The policy further designates an acceptable time frame for inspections and maintenance programs, which would occur annually, and renewal of the culvert needs study, which would occur on a 5-year basis. And this would be able to address the asset levels of service that are required within the asset management plan itself. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Thank you.
Questions? Hearing none, then a motion to approve recommendation. Councillor Jobin, Councillor Houston moves supported. No further questions. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. All right. No further unfinished business. No new business. Nothing further, then be no further business on this meeting on Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 meeting of Policies Priorities Committee be adjourned. Moved by Councillor Houston, Councillor Eganson, support. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.